Hello everyone. It's James again. And for those of you that are new here, thank you for giving this little cartoon man with a funny voice a bit of your time. And for those of you that have been with me for years, I thank you so much for supporting me and this channel. It means so much. Because sharing this word about narcissism and the other important topics we cover, such as faith and God, more and more people need this information more than ever. Which brings me to the topic of today. You see, there have been a few stories happening in the news, such as P. Diddy allegedly paying to have Tupac deleted is starting to gain some traction. And more people are talking about the alleged plot of P. Diddy possibly having a role in getting Biggie Smalls to the party he ended up at, where he too had his life taken from him. And for those of you that know my story, I've told several times, where a so-called friend of mine when I was a teenager, I believe he lured me to a particular location, where I was jumped and beaten up severely by several guys. One guy was hitting me with the back end of an object. An object if he chose to turn it around and make a little twitch of his finger. If that would have happened, I might. Well, I don't want to even think what could have happened to me. But you see, when you are young and trying to find your way in the world, and if you have no direction and no love at home, you might find yourself around narcissists that seem fun and cool and like they are in complete control, when they have no control over nothing, not even themselves. But you think, wow, we are close and we are there for each other. When in reality, they resent your kindness and your genuine way that you carry yourself around others. Anytime something happened good for or to this so-called friend of mine, I would be the first one there to help him celebrate. We both had terrible home lives, and I was happy anytime he was able to get a leg up. But if something even marginally good happened for me, he seemed to try to find a way to downgrade it or try to bring it down. For me it was very confusing. Now, as many of you know, when I was in grade school I was picked on quite badly, and for me having a friend was a rare thing. But by the time high school came around, I was living in a different area, and I was able to make some friends. And most of these friends weren't rough people. They were decent young guys like myself trying to find their way in the world too. But this other friend, the one I believe that lured me to be jumped and beaten up, I started to find out that he had some so-called friends from a previous neighborhood he was from, that were quite shady and rough. And I was so young and blind and didn't have anyone older there to tell me, hey, this guy is bad news. So I continued to hang out with this guy as I thought he was my friend. Like as if we were somehow brothers. Even though he would do weird envious things towards me and he would sometimes say things around others to make me look bad. But then other times, he would praise me for something in front of others. The typical tactic of a narcissist to keep you off balance. So you second guess yourself, wondering, are you really seeing things correctly? Well, as I've talked about before, one of the subscribers here asked if my mother, my narcissist mother, had anything to do with me being beaten up. And when I thought about it, I realized about a week or two before me being jumped, I caught my mother telling this so-called friend negative things about me. And she quickly stopped speaking when I entered the room. Later on, when myself and this so-called friend left for the evening to hang out, he seemed to be angry at me based on what my mother was telling him about me. And it wasn't until that subscriber mentioned what they did about my mother, did I think or even put two and two together. And I think it's a very good chance that before I had a chance to hear what was being said, this so-called friend probably said, "Don't worry, Mrs. Smith. I will take care of James." Because this guy was itching. When I think about it, he was itching to get a green light to do something bad to me. And a week or two later, I was being beaten up by some really big individuals. And then this so-called friend later showed up, pretending to be concerned and upset that all of this happened to me. Now do I think my mother knew what exactly was going to happen to me? No. No, I don't think she knew that at all. I think it was as simple as this so-called friend saying he would take care of me. And my mother likely agreed. But my problem was, I was unknowingly hanging out with a narcissist that was never my friend. And he at times had these somewhat interesting, and I now look back on it. Some of them were very dangerous people. People that when you talk to them at first glance, you might think they were cool or funny. But again, now looking back, most if not all of them were either narcissists or psychopaths or something not good at all. And when someone genuine ends up in their circle, they see you as a lamb to be eaten by the wolves. And when I see guys like Tupac and Biggie, I see two guys that weren't perfect by any stretch. But they knew right from wrong. And they had a moral compass. Yes. They both did a lot of wrong in their life. But look at who they were hanging around. Both of them were in a den full of vipers. Vipers that were envious of their genuine charisma and personality. Well, this young man behind me, Mr. Victor Moses, wanted to be a police officer. Because he liked people and liked connecting with people. It seems he wanted to be a police officer so he could do his part to make a difference in the world. I will put a link for this news story in the box below. But in this instance and many other like this, there's just one problem. When you have a kind heart and love in your soul and you go into an industry thinking it's about fair play, not realizing you are surrounded by narcissists or psychopaths, your health and life could be in danger. So as a police officer, you have to pass certain physical tests. And part of those tests is you have to likely be pepper sprayed and tased, and you have to hit practice dummies and punching pads to simulate combat. But the department he was trying to join had what appears to be a regular violent hazing ritual, where they really beat up the recruits really badly, just to see who will make it to the end. Now Victor, the first believed, disclosed that he had sickle cell traits, although he was likely in pretty good shape, as he was an avid hiker. But the punishment they dealt out to Victor was too much. So much so, even when he wasn't responsive, they kept standing him back up to take more punishment allegedly, along with paramedics checking him and clearing him for more punishment allegedly. Then when the people that were allegedly beating him up finally grabbed a clue, and they got him to the hospital, it was alleged they lied and didn't say the truth for Victor's condition. Now here's the thing. Even though Victor was probably in good shape, with his sickle cell traits, he probably should have reconsidered such a job, even if there was no hazing involved. The news story doesn't say anything about them tasing him. But I do know from the videos I've seen of police recruits, they typically have to be tased and they typically have to be pepper sprayed. And the tasing alone for someone that has underlying medical conditions isn't something anyone should willingly sign up for. But with that being said, I believe it's possible that Victor went into this thinking the best. Much like I was thinking the best of this so-called friend. And I'm sure these guys at first made him feel like he was one of the guys. And it for a moment made him feel strong and capable. Much like any group like this might do. I'm pretty sure at first, Tupac thought all of the guys he was hanging out with on his record label were his best buds. But it turned out more than likely most of them weren't. Some were. But likely most were the cause of more trouble coming into Tupac's life. The same for Biggie Smalls. So I think Victor went into things thinking, no way, these guys are really going to hurt me. They are my new family. We have each other's back. But likely he didn't understand and realize. These guys were itching to beat him within an inch of his life. Simply because they could tell he had a good soul. Demons hate love and kindness and joy. There is a police officer I will be talking about shortly. You likely know the one I'm talking about. Where the woman said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." And he pulled his weapon and ended her life. Now does this mean all police are bad? No. But narcissists and their psychopath cousins have a way of taking over most workplaces they get involved in. So much so. Those that have a heart and that are decent tend to leave. And thus you have a workplace full of narcissists. And when someone like Victor comes in, they might buddy up to him to get him to feel safe. Then when the hazing starts, they beat him within an inch of his life. And it's been reported that this police department in Denver had to shell out a lot of money due to violent behavior from their officers. Millions and millions of dollars have been paid out to victims of these police officers. Yes. Police officers need to train to fight when it's needed. But this training should be at the hands of professionals that can teach these police officers to fight if their life is in danger and they need to fight to survive. Yes. No question, this is a skill that needs to be learned and honed with a professional teaching them. But it looks like they are a bunch of hotheads that look for any chance they can to beat up someone that they feel they can get away with it on, someone that has a light of love that shines bright. Do I think Victor having his sickle cell traits should have led him to even try out for the police department? No. No, I don't. But should he have been savagely beaten the way he was beaten? No. No one should be hazed and beaten this way. And when he disclosed that he had sickle cell traits, they should have said, before we go ahead with the training. Cough cough. I mean hazing. You do realize you're going to get hit and take some physical punishment? We want to make sure you are healthy enough to get through this, and you might not be. Talking with the doctors or paramedics there. And they might have made the correct choice to tell him that he might not be a good fit for such a job, based on his underlying health conditions. But like most narcissists out there, they can't help themselves. I've said it before. And I will say it again. Narcissists so bad want to know what it's like to end someone's life. But they don't want to get into trouble for it. So they try to get you to do the work for them. I will give you an example. Have you seen videos where people get hurt from jumping off of a rock into a lake? Or swinging on those swing ropes? I believe some of the time. Like 50% of the time. Things like that happen. Because someone is trying to show off. And act cool. But the other 50% of the time, I believe they are being egged on by someone that pretends to care about their friend's well-being. But deep down inside knows how dangerous it is and wants to see them get hurt or worse. For them to lose their life. And if such a thing happens, they can walk away scot-free. Because that person did it to themselves. Well, in a situation like this, had he lost his life, they would have said, they didn't know he was sick with a medical problem. And it was just normal training, blah 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 and blah. But the problem for them is he did live. And there were times he was allegedly picked back up and stood back onto his feet to take more punishment. He was unresponsive and unable to quit verbally or give consent. Well, sadly, due to all of this, Victor lost both of his legs below the knee. And he has limited use of both of his hands. Look. Be super careful when you are around others. Especially groups of people. Because you just don't know how they are seeing you. Even if they are so-called cool with you and act like your buddy or your brother or your sister. Remember that video of that woman that brought her friends to Mexico? And they beat her until she lost her life. And part of it is we see what we think is good in them. And maybe, just maybe, if we do this and that and the other, they would be a decent person. No. No. That's not how this works. And again, I think about Tupac and Biggie. Out of all of the people they were around, though they weren't perfect, they were the light that shined the brightest and they seemed to know right from wrong. Victor sadly walked into a den of evil people. And they got him to feel like part of the team. And then they likely took great pleasure in destroying his life. And I say all of this to say, especially for those that are new to learning about narcissism and narcissistic abuse, If you have these types of so-called friends in your life, get away from them now and don't look back. Being lonely can be not the most fun feeling in the world. But God is with you. Do not let your loneliness allow you to spend another moment with these people. Because each and every time you do, your life is literally at risk. My prayers go out to Victor Moses. I understand he is having a hard time learning how to walk, and is in severe pain and relying heavily on pain medications. I pray God heals and helps him. With that said, please get away from these evil people. And I do hope your day is blessed. And until next time, bye for now. And be good to yourself.